Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this Local Waters Done Well online session, where hopefully you'll get lots of answers to all of your questions and really get some great information from our Local Water Done Well experts. One of them in particular is Ian. Now, can I just check, Ian, are you able to say something? I just want to check that we can hear you because we can't see you at the moment. Okay. All right. We can see your screen, but we can't.
Is that better?
Yep.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
There we go. We've got you. Fantastic. Okay, so we can see you and your screen. So everybody, I'll let Ian take over and I'll join you later for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for your time tonight. So my name's Ian Morton. I'm the project manager supporting Thames Coromandel with Local Water Done Well. Online, we've also got Brett Houston. Brett's a water services manager, so Brett can answer any of the technical details and any of the details about the specific assets that you have within Thames Coromandel. The session will be recorded and we plan to finish at 8 p.m. We've got a presentation just to run through. It will take about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. So just as far as questions, there's a Q&A chat button at the top of your screen. So to ask a question, all the mics are turned off. So to ask a question, if you click on that button at the top of your screen, and you can do that at any time, and pop your question in there, and the team will then just collate that. And then once we get on to Q&A, we can start running through the questions. I will remind you when we start the questions where that button is. Anyone that still has questions even after this, we'll give you an email link so that you can actually email any questions if we don't get through them all as well. So I'll just maybe start with just Local Water Done Well and just what it is. So Local Water Done Well is central government legislation, so legislation from central government. It's across the whole of New Zealand and it's specifically targeting councils, so city councils and district councils, and those that are managing three waters. So the three waters being water, so the water that you get from the tap, wastewater, so the water that you flush down the toilet or down your sink, and also storm water, and that's the water that is managing all that rainfall when we get rainfall events and takes the water away from the areas we don't want it to be in. So the previous Labour government had put forward a Three Waters Reform Initiative, and that was a mandatory process. So everyone had to amalgamate through into four large entities. When the coalition government got in, the current government got in, they repealed that in February 2024, and they replaced it with Local Water Done Well in September 2024. So for Local Water Done Well, each council has to prepare a water service delivery plan, and each plan has to define how it will meet current and future regulatory requirements, how it will fully fund Three Waters going forward, and also it provides some new financing tools, which I'll talk through, and it also provides some new regulations as well. Fundamentally, we've got to prepare a water service delivery plan by September, and as part of that, we've got to publicly consult. So really, this is what we are seeking some feedback from you on through this consultation period around what water service delivery options do we have for the future and what do we put into a water service delivery plan in September. So just as far as the key aspects of Local Water Done Well, so I've talked about the water service plan that we have to prepare. It's got to provide details around the assets that are in place, also financial information, borrowing, investment required, and also define who should deliver water services for the future. So again, that's a focus at the moment. For Local Water Done Well, the central government provided some new structural and financing tools. What that means is they've provided some tools to allow water service organisations to borrow more money than councils can currently borrow. So the government said if you set up a water service organisation and have a professional board in place, separate from council, and that professional board is based on skills, we will allow the water service organisation to borrow more. So currently councils can borrow around 200 to 250%. If they go with this new water service organisation, they can borrow up to 500%, so around double. And what that means is they can borrow. These assets are, in some cases, 80 years lifespan, so they can borrow over a much longer time period. It also allows them to bring forward some spend if they need to, so that they can do some spend to save projects, so that they can fund some projects now rather than having to band-aid the solution for a long period of time. So it allows more flexibility on borrowing. Within local water done well, these water service plans have to show financial sustainability. And what that means is the water money that comes in from rates needs to cover all of the requirements for Three Waters, and that's financing cost, depreciation, maintenance. We can't move those costs, further down the line. We've got to fully fund this now. And in the past, some councils have made the call to move costs and not fund it just now, and that's no longer available as part of local water done well. And as far as the new regulations, so there's two aspects to this. So Taumata Arowai are in place, and they'll be regulating from a water services authority. So they'll be putting in place new wastewater standards, and we've got to provide reports. So whoever is providing water services in the future has to provide regular reports to Taumata Arowai. So they'll be checking to make sure drinking water is being provided safely, and also the wastewater as well. In addition, there's economic regulation that's been put in place, and that's to ensure that that each of the water service delivery mechanisms are being efficient, and there'll probably be benchmarking. So you'll start seeing a lot more transparent information as the public on how each council is doing financially, and also they've got a backstop so that if prices start getting out of sync, then they can start coming in and actually start regulating. So there's some economic regulation in place as well. So as far as Thames Coromandel District Council, so again, this is primarily around the assets that council manage. So there's around 890 million of assets that council manage. And within the map there, you can see where those assets are across the peninsula. So that covers, again, water, wastewater, and stormwater. So it's quite a large amount of assets we're talking about that would be managed going forward and need to be managed going forward as part of local water done well. So this does not cover private supplies. Private supplies have to comply with some regulation through Taumata Arowai, and through this regulation, it does put an onus on either councils or whoever will manage the water services in the future to provide support to those private supplies if serious issues occur with that supply. So as a bit of a backstop, but really this legislation focuses on those assets that council currently manage. So we looked at 5 options initially, 2 of the options associated with a community trust, and 1 option about setting up a water service organisation purely for Thames Coromandel, so with no other partners. When we looked at them, though, there wasn't really any valid rationale for proceeding with those options. So a community trust would need to borrow from a bank at quite high rates, whereas council and this water organisations can borrow through the Local Government Act at a much lower interest rates for any borrowing. So again, there was no benefits in those 3 options. So we narrowed it down to 2 options. So The first option being an internal business unit. So that's really running things very similar to what happens now. So council will still make the decisions. They will manage and run the water services as a business unit within council. There is some requirements where the funding and the costs have to be ring fenced. So all the costs that come in from rates for Three Waters has to be spent on Three Waters, including any shared services. So HR costs or IT costs need to be fully funded there. So there's some changes in the background that would happen under an internal business unit, but fundamentally there would be very little change. The second option here is looking to create and work with our partnering councils and look at creating a water service organisation where Thames Coromandel would be one shareholder. We would set up a shareholding council between the partners, and that shareholding council would prepare, each council would prepare a statement of expectations annually, and that would be require to be given effect to. There's quite a high bar within the legislation around what the water service organisation has to do with that statement of expectation. The shareholding councils would also appoint a board of directors, and then once that board of directors are in place, they would then do the day-to-day management of the water service organisation itself and provide regular reports back to the councils to say how they're actually doing. There's 3 sub-regional variation options on the table. So Thames Coromandel are in a very good position. So they've got really good assets in place across the peninsula. The assets are in really good quality. We've got a long-term plan that fully funds all the requirements for what we need to do and be regulatory compliant. And we've got quite low debt as well. So from a local water done well point of view, each option could easily be delivered against. Both options are very good. So so the sub-regional variations, one of them is working with a sub-region and a grouping of Bay of Plenty councils. So that's Tauranga City Council, Western Bay of Plenty, and potentially others. Another grouping is working with Waikato Water Done Well. So that's a group of Waikato councils. So all councils within the Waikato, with the exception of Hamilton and Waikato District Council, who have decided to go out and set up their own water service organisation. So that's the 3 options that we have on the table at this moment in time. But again, Thames Coromandel are in a very good position, and lots of people want to partner with them because of that as well. So just as far as the options themselves, so option 1, delivering in an in-house business unit. So the average cost that is currently paid by ratepayers in Thames Coromandel currently is around $2,000. We've modelled that by 2034 through that option 1, in-house business unit. Costs will increase just because we've got to do more. We've got more regulatory requirements. We've got an increase in funding for CapEx. So the cost will increase by $500 over the next 10 years. But there are benefits in staying with an in-house business unit. So some of the benefits being there's local decision making. There's also really good integration with other council activities, the planning functions, the transport functions. So that's some of the benefits of retaining that, that local decision making and local influence. There is some negatives though of option 1, and that's, it is more expensive in the longer term, and especially as you look beyond 2034, it gets more expensive and more expensive. There's also an increased competition for staff and contractors. So as other people across the country are setting up these water service organisations, they'll be looking for staff, and they'll be putting in place long-term contracts for the same contractors that we use. So there is more competition there. Just as far as option 2, and this is being put forward as a preferred option by council for consideration, and that's looking to join a new water service organisation. So one of the key differences there and the benefits is the cost. So obviously $2,000 is what you pay now. We've modelled this with some quite detailed financial modelling, and by 2034 the cost reduced to $1,950. So that's done primarily through scale and efficiencies that can be achieved. So we recognise there will be some upfront costs for setting up this water service organisation. There will also be some additional costs for having the board in place. But they're quite small costs as in the scheme of what will be delivered by this water service organisation. And we've looked internationally at different people who have done this before, and what we've assumed is that some cost saving. We've not assumed all the cost savings that we've seen from comparators. We've assumed about 50% of those cost savings. There's other benefits there. It does allow you to borrow a lot more, so up to that 500%. So it just means, again, you can maybe bring some projects forward, whereas previously or with option one, you'd be slightly constrained with what you can do and when. There is some negatives though with option two, and that's less local control. So you won't have as much influence. You will be able to put forward a statement of expectations, but you won't have as much local control. There is also some transition risks and some stranded costs. So as you set up these organizations, there's some risk there as well. So there is some negatives, but there's some benefits as well. There is further details in the consultation document on specifically the advantages and the disadvantages. So we're just about to go into the Q&A session itself. So again, just a reminder, if you go to the top of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can press that button and ask your question in there. The team will then collate that and then feed that through, and we'll try and answer as many of your questions as we can. You can go in and say anonymously as well if you want to ask questions anonymously, so that function is available. Councils are really keen to hear from you. This is a big decision for them. So there is details about how you can access online, or you can pick up a paper form. And also, if you have any other questions that we don't get covered today, there's an email address there that you can ask us any further questions. So following consultation, we'll prepare a report to let councillors know the feedback from this consultation, and they'll look to make a decision in June. And then by August, we have to prepare a water service delivery plan and submit that by the 3rd of September. So that's what will happen next. So I'll just stop there and I'll hand over to Kerry to start asking any questions that we've received.
Kia ora. Thank you, Ian. That was a great spiel, actually, so really informative stuff. We do have a few questions that have landed so far. For anybody watching that maybe hasn't had any of their own questions answered yet, feel free to use that tab at the top of your menu there or the top of your screen, and feel free to post either with your name or anonymously, and we'll get some answers for you. So to start off with, we've got from Anonymous, if we join with other councils, will there be equal representation in terms of governance?
That's a great question. So as we proceed with the partnership discussions, we'll be putting in place the shareholding council. So the shareholding councils generally have equal representation at the beginning. As far as equal representation in the setup and once it's actually up and running, that's to be decided. And what we'll be doing is that will be decided through a commitment agreement. So we'll prepare a document that will kind of have some really clear partnership principles and clear bottom lines for Thames Coromandel, and some of our objectives. And one of the areas that we'll have in there is, representation. Now, the details have still to be worked out, but as I mentioned, Thames Coromandel are in a very good situation. So we've got a choice of different partners, and those partners know that. So we're in a strong position to get a fair and equitable representation at the table. We don't know exactly what it will look like. I will say, though, as we go through, if the decision is to go for a water service organisation, council does have an option to off-ramp. So if we proceed down a joint service organisation and at any point in time we get concerned that our objectives aren't being met or some of our bottom lines aren't being met, or we're concerned about representation, we can step out and just go for an internal business unit. So there is a mechanism where if we get concerned at any point through that process, we can step out, and we will be doing some quite serious due diligence leading into this because, again, it's a really big decision.
Thank you, Ian. We have another question here. You've potentially answered it already just with that. It ties in with it. The question was, how will iwi be involved in a potential water services organisation? But I guess stemming from that and what you've just said, I guess we could probably shape that to how will iwi be involved in the commitment agreement that you're talking about?
So within the previous Three Waters reform, iwi were within the previous legislation, iwi had seats at the table, at the governance table. It was mandated as part of the Labour government's requirement. Under this legislation, iwi do not have a seat at the table by mandate. That is not to say if it's important for each individual council that there is iwi or Te Tiriti representation on that board, that the shareholding council can identify skills that they think are important to be on the board. And if one of those skills is, for example, Te Tiriti, then that will ensure that there is some Maori representation on the board. But it's not a given, and it's certainly not a mandate through this legislation that iwi are at the table.
Cool. Thank you, Ian. Another one here from Anonymous. What if my water comes from the farmer's property across the road? That spring feeds 3 to 5 properties in my neighbourhood, and we manage the header tank, pipes, and supply ourselves. How will we be affected?
Yeah, so that is treated as a private supply, so really isn't covered within this legislation. For those private supplies, there is a requirement through Taumata Arawai where people have to register. So if it's up to 25 people, there are supplies, or up to 100 people or over 100, there's different requirements. There's a requirement for whoever is providing that water to register by November of this year, and then deliver or implement whatever the plans are that they put forward within 2 years. So this legislation doesn't really impact that at all. There won't be any changes through this legislation. This is primarily around the assets that council control.
Okay, great. We've got a question that we received ahead of the meeting that might be of interest. It reads, how do we maintain realistic quality levels so we don't expect Rolls-Royce standards for small communities?
Yeah, really good question. So again, annually, each council will prepare a statement of expectations, and those statement of expectations will clearly identify what is expected for Thames Coromandel in each community. And within that, we can be extremely clear that, we don't want an extremely expensive solution, but here are the minimum standards that we want it to meet. So we can define it within the statement of expectations. I think there's other mechanisms that we can do. So across the country, there is new wastewater standards, and there's also water standards in place. And again, each council will be ensuring that it meets those regulations. We have to do that as part of this legislation. But as far as gold plating the solutions, any business case will be reviewed to ensure it isn't gold plated and it's efficient. And again, there'll be an economic regulator to make sure that that is not happening as well.
Okay. Another anonymous question here. Do we know how many voting seats TCDC will have on the new board?
No, so again, that's a level of detail that we would need to work through. So again, we would work through a commitment agreement, and then as part of that commitment agreement, we would specify, depending on who the partners are, what type of representation we want, and also and then work through that detail with the potential partners. Just to give you an example, so Hamilton and Waikato District Council have a commitment agreement between the two of them. At the moment, Hamilton and Waikato District Council have the same number of seats at the table on their commitment agreement. So it's not a given that a large council will want 10 seats and others will have 1 one seat if we were to join with, for example, Hamilton or Taronga. It generally doesn't work like that. But again, that's a detail that we'd need to work through. And because Thames Coromandel had lots of options, if that became a showstopper, then again, we could step out.
All right. Whereas, bear with me 1 second. So we've got a question here again, an anonymous one. So it's questioning about the timing around the implementation of a preferred option if the joint CCO is chosen. So when would the potential CCO be up and running?
Sure. So some councils are proceeding at pace. So the likes of Hamilton and Waikato, they're going really fast to set this up by 1 July next year. The reason they're doing that is because they've got a lot of growth to fund and they want access to that 500% ASAP. So they're driving that really fast. For us, Thames Coromandel, we have to provide an implementation plan as part of the water service delivery plan. So that will be submitted in September. It's expected the minister will review the plans and approve them by the end of 2025, and we would then look to have an implementation plan of around 2 years. So we're expecting a 2-year period for implementation, and during that implementation, we'll be doing further due diligence. We'll be looking to see if we need to off-ramp. So there'll be a lot of detailed stuff worked through during that 2 years, as well as setting up as well.
Okay. We've got another one here. How will you protect the public water supply from alternative water supplies, such as tank water and bore water?
So again, this legislation is really around the water that's provided by Thames Coromandel District Council. So those drinking water supplies, this legislation doesn't look at, I'll say, the supplies that's provided from a private point of view. I'm not sure that answers the question. If you're yeah, so perhaps maybe ask another question. Perhaps you're asking, are we looking to protect the actual bores or the river level? So maybe if you can ask a follow-on question.
I could give a little bit of answer on that.
Sure, thank
We
you.
do a lot of checking on our bores, for example. We do regular surveys of them to determine what is happening to the aquifer and whether there is any impact from other sources, etc., on those bores. So that is part of our normal operation and maintenance of our current supplies. Other alternate supplies, tank water, we don't use tank water. We don't have tank water basically near our supplies. As Ian said, if they've got any other specific question we can answer, we'll be able to supply that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brett. So perhaps anonymous, if that hopefully that answered your question, but if it didn't, if you want to just perhaps ask it again with a few more specifics, and hopefully we can, get some answers for you. And speaking of, actually, we're starting to run low a little bit on the questions coming through. We've got a few on the go, but if anybody does have questions, again, feel free to use the Q&A button at the top of your screen and we will get to them in due course. We've got one here from Chris Todd. Chris, thank you. We've got a question. If your property is not on a council-run water supply scheme or a wastewater collection and disposal system, will either option have an impact on us as ratepayers? So similar to a question that was asked earlier, but specifically from a ratepayer perspective.
So the way water charges occur at the moment, so we've set an average of about $2,000. So some of those, your rating bill is split between volumetric rates. So if you are on a water supply and you have a water meter, and there's a certain rate for that. But there's also a general or a district rate that applies to all ratepayers across Thames Coromandel. So, and for the general rate, that applies to everyone with a property, regardless of whether those services are provided or not. So yes, it will have an impact if we decide to, for example, go for a cheaper solution in the future through the Joint Water Service Organisation or retain within council. But it won't change your services, but it could have an impact on your billing for any of the general rates.
Okay, thank you. There's not so much well, I guess it is a question, but Ian, you've mentioned Taumata Arowai as a organisation with a Maori name. We're just wondering if there is an English translation for that.
I can answer that, Kerry.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Brett.
Okay. Taumata Arowai's name was set up several years ago, I think at 2022, sorry. They are in the process of changing that to Water Services Taumata Arowai. That's what Taumata Arowai means. So they're doing the English and the Maori name, such as Health New Zealand has a two-part name as well.
Cool. Thank you, Brett. Hopefully that answers the question for you, Anonymous. If not, feel free to, again, just be maybe a bit more specific in asking the question again, and we'll hopefully get to it in due course. Another question here from Anonymous. Will either option result in less water restrictions because there is better infrastructure?
Brett,
I can do that one.
Yeah.
as well.
Thought that might be yours, Brett.
Yeah. Look, water restrictions are put on generally because of issues due to storms, weather events affecting our water systems, or potentially an issue in the process or plant. For example, if we have a major water leak on a network, that may start to drain our reservoirs to the point where we can't keep up. So we ask residents to conserve water. At the moment, the only area that is affected by our inability to provide full supply is Hahei Beach. They always have restrictions on over the summer because we take water from an aquifer with another organisation, and we have to monitor that bore. And when the water level in the bore drops to a certain point, then we need to put restrictions on. We have a new water treatment plant and a new bore coming online around July this year for Hahei, and they will no longer have that level of water restriction. But I can't predict and I can't stop weather events or equipment failure at times. So there will still continue to be restrictions due to those. And one little storm event over a peak period can cause some major implications and the need for restrictions.
Thank you, Brett. We've got one more question here from the Q&A chat. Is it correct that we don't know who pays the new board members or how much each will be paid?
So the way that will be organised is, again, if council proceeds with the water service organisation, a shareholding council will be set up. So that will be elected members from each council involved will set that up. They will set the remuneration amounts for the board, set the skills required of the board, the terms of the board member of the board itself. So they will have a vital hand to basically define all of that, and that will then provide very good clarity for that board. As far as how much the board members will be paid, that will be, there'll be benchmarking done to see what other board members get paid, both from government boards as well as private boards, to make sure that that's benchmarked appropriately. And again, we'll have an economic regulator keeping an eye on those things to make sure it's quite consistent across New Zealand.
Thank you, Ian. And I think that was the last question from our Q&A chat, as far as I can tell. So if anybody watching has a question that hasn't been answered yet, or just wants some clarity on anything that has been discussed so far, please use the Q&A chat, and we will get to it shortly. in the meantime, we've got a couple of questions that were asked earlier before the meeting started, which I'll refer to. So one of them was, how do we make sure we don't become the poor cousins of bigger councils?
Yeah, and that really goes back to the commitment agreement. So as we set the water service organisation up, we need to make sure that that there is no impact to TCDC ratepayers. So again, we'll work through to make sure that there is good representation, that the statement of expectations will agree partnership principles. We'll be clear about what our objectives are, and also we'll make sure that there is some bottom lines that if that's not achieved, we will step out. So again, we'll be extremely clear about that up front. And in fact, we're already having initial discussions, but council won't be making a decision on the preferred option, internal business unit, or joint WSO until June. It's expected that we'll prepare a water service delivery plan. Whether at that point in time we'll pick a particular partner or whether we'll say, actually, there's still various options in due diligence we need to run through and more information we need because this is a big decision. And that might be that we don't do that until 2026 as far as choosing a partner. What we do have to do by June, however, is we have to choose between whether we carry on with an internal business unit or go with a joint water service organisation.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And I think that's all of our questions at this stage, unless
Kerry,
anybody else?
there is one that we've sort of missed. It says
Yes.
2034 is only 9 years away. What large renewal projects are on the horizon? Thames wastewater treatment plant, ? Which option is best to tackle this project? In our long-term plan that was issued, which is 2024 to 34, there are a large number of projects listed there under stormwater, wastewater, and water. Those are the large renewal type projects or upgrade projects that we have planned. Thames wastewater treatment plant has a small amount of money put into it at the moment. We are still doing investigations, but that plant is running reasonably well against its compliance. We are not non-compliant there at all. We are achieving our compliance, but we believe we could still fine-tune that with small improvements. For example, we've just put new energy efficient aerators for a couple of $100,000 into that plant, which improves the process within it and makes it easier for us to operate that plant. So we are not at the point of looking at a major upgrade of Thames wastewater treatment plant at this time. However, we are looking at Matarangi waste treatment plant. We've got 2 new water treatment plants coming online in the next 6 months, which is Hahei and Matarangi. And we will continue to focus, and I do mean this truthfully, we are trying to do small improvements to our current equipment and processes that don't cost a lot of money, but sometimes achieve as much improvement as a major capital cost project would do. We've done some work in one plant where we spent $50,000 and achieved a result that you would normally expect from a $3 or $4 million upgrade. That's what we're trying to focus on as a team.
I think, Brett, just to add to that, if you look at the 2 options on the table, internal business unit and a joint water service organisation, that joint water service organisation obviously has access to a lot more debt. So if anything big was to come up as a surprise, whether it's through climate change or sea level rise or even just an issue with a particular plant, that joint water service organisation would have access to much more debt to cope with, I'll say, changes or shocks that are required. And also they can spread the cost over a much longer time period. So if that's the concern, what if something big happens and how do we afford that as a community? That joint water service organisation has access to a lot more debt and can deliver and manage that debt over a much longer period of time.
Thank you, gentlemen. That actually just sparks a question from me, actually. You're talking about Hahei, Matarangi, some of the smaller communities within the wider district. What concerns, if any, are there that these smaller communities may get perhaps overlooked if we joined up with a larger, more far-reaching entity?
So certainly from a capital delivery program and actually from an operational perspective, those communities will be still well serviced, even if it's being serviced from further away. And what I mean by that is the council on an annual basis will put together a statement of expectations. They will work with the communities to prepare these statement of expectations. These statement of expectations have to be given effect to. So again, it's got quite a legal standing as part of the legislation where the Water Service Organisation has to provide for that. A question that came up earlier was around, does that mean that we'll be moving staff away from the area into, be it the Waikato or Tauranga? No, it's not expected that we will be moving staff or people that are needed to be close by to these assets to fix them. And I think Brett made the point that a lot of these a lot of people that the public see are through our contractors, and those contractors aren't expected to change. So we don't believe that there'll be a significant change in service, and we will have that mechanism through the statement of expectations to be clear about what we need for our communities through that, and the communities will have an input to that.
Thank you. We have a new question from Anonymous. Is the access to increased debt shared between councils, or will each council have that increased debt separately?
Yeah, great. Again, great question. So the way we are in discussions with some other councils, there is two ways of looking at things. One is in a harmonised approach where you basically get all the cost of your assets and all your debt and put it in one big bucket, and any costs and revenue that come in the future will be dealt with in one big bucket, and everyone will across the area will have the same bill. That's not going to work for Thames Coromandel because again you're in such a good position. So there's an approach called non-harmonized where within the Water Service Organisation you've got, I'll say, business units or buckets for each council that's involved, and what will happen is you'll allocate the costs and the revenue to that individual area as well as the debt, and it will be treated as, I'll say, internal business units within that organisation so that it can be treated separately. And for me, that would be the best option for Thames Coromandel because again, you're in such a good position, and we need to make sure that that the Thames Coromandel ratepayers aren't being asked to fund improvements in other areas or fund debt for other areas as well. So that's a way that we are proposing that it would work for Thames Coromandel, and again, that will be worked through in detailed negotiations.
We have another question that's just landed from Anonymous. How will this impact council staff? I guess coming from that is, will staff be, what's the chance of staff losing their roles or moving to a different organisation?
Sure.
Go on in. Yep.
So we have done an assessment. So obviously we'll still need staff to deliver the three water services. So we're not expecting a huge change in staff. It's certainly not initially. It could be over time that, if there's a kind of an efficiency around, well, we've got 7 people planning or designing some of our wastewater or water stuff, and we only need 6 across a larger area, then that might happen. But we we're not seeing the efficiencies coming from, I would say, a staff perspective. A lot of the efficiencies are driven by procurement, by cost efficiency, by buying, rather than, buying stuff for one plant, rather than buying 10 plant materials at the one time, through being better at design and having, longer contracts in place with these design consultants, with the geotech engineers. So that's where a lot of the cost savings come, is through that procurement space. So we're not seeing a large change as far as staff are concerned. If it was a water service organisation, again, those staff would transfer to that water service organisation. And again, some of the bottom lines that council will be looking at will be some protections for staff as part of that, to make sure that there is a good job to go to. But actually, the majority of staff within councils on local water done well is going, actually, we'd quite like to be part of a large professional organisation that focuses purely on water. So in the past, staff have been quite supportive of that change. We still expect there obviously to be staff in the same areas as there is now, but again, that might change over a longer period of time, but certainly not initially. Brett, I'll maybe just ask you if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, look, I was going to say much the same, Ian. Those efficiencies are through, wait a minute, we've got 10 people here who have done this type of work before. We don't need to go and redesign something from scratch again. We might say, how much will it cost to build one wastewater pump station? And we get a price for it. But if we said we're building 5 waste pump stations across this water services organisation, suddenly we're going to get a lot better price per pump station. Those are going to be driving the efficiencies initially. Obviously, there will be rationalisation over time, but we don't expect that to impact on council staff greatly at all. On my team are going to be right in the middle of this, and we're looking forward to this because we can focus totally on what we're doing, and we might have more resources and support to allow us to do the work.
And I will say it will be quite a competitive market in that space across the country. There's a significant increase in spend in Three Waters, and across the country there'll be, we don't have enough people to do that, so there'll be quite a competitive market, across the country for all types of resources to support the improvements for Three Waters that are needed.
Okay, thank you, Ian and Brett. I believe that was our last question for the evening. Unless anybody watching would like to ask anything else, please do. We've got just over 10 minutes before we were due to finish, but if not, then perhaps we'll wrap things up early. Brett, Ian, is there anything you'd like to add?
So just to close from my point of view, so this recording will be available online in around 2 days' time. So if there's anything that you want to kind of check again, then you can come back and have a look at that. And also the Q&A session that we did from earlier today is online. There is a lot of materials on our website, so further details if you want to have a look through any of that. But I will just encourage you, councillors genuinely want to understand what our communities are saying around local water done well. This is a big decision for them, so we'd just really appreciate if you can spend the time just to jump online, fill out the consultation document, or pick up a paper copy and drop that into one of the libraries or one of the service centres. That would be really appreciated. There is also an email that's on your screen just now, lwdw@tcdc.govt.nz. So again, consultation doesn't close until the 15th of May. And if you've got any other questions at all, then please drop us an email and we can respond to that.
If I can just say, this is the 7th consultative session I've been involved with over the last few weeks on local water done well. And the level of residents, ratepayers' input and questions has been really pleasing. Obviously, I work in the water industry and I'm passionate about it. and it's lovely to see other people who are passionate about getting a good service, making sure we're making the right decisions moving forward. As council staff, we love to be involved in providing a service to our customers.
That's great words there. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Ian. If nothing else, I think we'll probably draw it to a close. Not 9 minutes early. So some good questions there, some great information to be had. So thank you both. And as Ian said, this meeting has been recorded. We will be putting it on our website in due course for easy reference. And also, as mentioned, if you have any other questions or if you felt like things weren't answered as best as you would like, please use that email, which is also tagged in the beginning of the Q&A chat. So thank you all for your time. I hope it was helpful. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.